Comfort is treated as proof of readiness. The person recognizes familiar patterns, feels little internal alarm, and concludes the situation is under control. The body is calm, so the judgment lens is confident. Experience is recast as a permanent shield. The calendar fills with meetings, updates, and review sessions that simulate effort, but avoid the friction of actual rehearsal and dry runs. The structure looks like work. The effort is redistributed to appearance and coordination, not to building competence. The person believes the visible motion means the unseen part is covered. The mechanism is substitution. Repeated exposure to similar tasks reduces subjective uncertainty, and the brain responds by lowering preparatory drive. Past performance is misapplied to new conditions that only look similar. Shortcuts feel efficient because nothing punishes them immediately. The person stops constructing contingencies because prior improvisation worked well enough. They internalize a rule that the next time will be like the last time. The habit forms because it conserves effort and produces no short-term penalty. The pattern looks like maturity, but it is only conservation. The work was never actually done. Language shifts to justify it. We know this. We've seen this before. We can adjust in a moment. These claims feel factual from the inside because they match memory. Memory is selective. It captures the positive peak, not the weak edge cases that were rescued by luck or help from others. Each win cements the idea that preparation is optional. The person fuses identity with competence, then uses identity as a reason to skip the work that would test it. The narrative becomes stable because it is never allowed to be falsified in private. Tools become replacements for practice. Templates are praised as systems. Checklists are praised as discipline. Briefing documents are praised as research. The output of other people's preparation is consumed and treated as one's own. Consumption feels like understanding because it reduces confusion. This reduction is misread as mastery. The person becomes fluent in summaries and calls it depth. The gap between recognition and performance is ignored because recognition is easy and performance is costly. Discipline slipped, and standards quietly fell. The social environment aids the shift. Teams optimize for coordination signals, not for readiness. Status accrues to the person who looks composed and answers quickly. The room rewards smooth conversation. People who insist on drills are framed as rigid. The fastest person sets the pace, so the slow work of building capability loses legitimacy. Colleagues have no visibility into preparation, so they infer it from polish. The person realizes polish is enough to win the signal game and stops investing in what cannot be seen. The loop closes itself without intent. Fatigue also nudges the pattern. Preparation is cognitively heavy and emotionally costly. It exposes gaps and produces discomfort. Comfort feels like relief, and relief is taken as efficient self-management. The person calls it sustainability. They reduce stress today and assume it preserves output tomorrow. The savings are banked as time gained, not risk stored. That risk accumulates in hidden parts of the work and emerges under pressure when there is no slack left to absorb it. By then the person is certain their approach was sound, because the early stages were smooth. Signals that once prompted preparation are reinterpreted. A quiet inbox looks like stability. A positive comment is taken as coverage. Minor wins are treated as validation of the whole approach. In reality, the conditions have changed. The supporting cast is different. The distribution of problems has moved. The person cannot see this because their sampling is narrow and curated by comfort. They rarely put themselves in situations where new information would collide with their assumptions. The data set they draw from is friendly by design. They lost their advantage over others. The pattern persists because it protects identity. Admitting the need to prepare suggests the past wins were fragile. The person refuses that implication. They defend the story rather than the outcome. They avoid drills because drills deliver clear feedback without excuses. They prefer environments where we will seek and carry the day. Ambiguity becomes a shield. When ambiguity is high, confidence can coexist with ignorance without triggering internal conflict. This is why the pattern does not feel reckless from the inside. It feels like choosing where to spend energy. Busyness becomes the main alibi. Calendars fill with standing commitments that create the illusion of being in demand. Each scheduled block becomes a reason. Preparation is impossible. The person mistakes constraint for importance. The constraint is they add check-ins and reviews that keep them central and responsive, then use that centrality to justify how little time is left for drilling the core craft. The workload is heavy, but it is not heavy in the way that builds capability. The weight is administrative, not developmental. Feedback becomes blunt and late. Early feedback requires exposure, and preparation creates early exposure to reality. Without preparation, the first real exposure is public. That setting forces others to protect the person's face rather than their competence. Private correction is replaced by collective accommodation. The person takes the lack of explicit critique as evidence that they are still performing at the old level. In truth, the environment learned to root around them, or to lower the bar silently to avoid disruption. The person confuses the absence of resistance with the presence of strength. Shortcuts multiply because they worked once. Copying a prior deck replaces fresh analysis. Repeating a familiar narrative replaces checking the base rate. Dropping a test replaces verifying constraints. The person learns to rely on plausible patterns rather than verified facts. Plausibility becomes the operating criterion because it survives meetings and satisfies listeners. This creates a self-fulfilling loop. The more plausible the person sounds, the less they are pressed, the less pressure they feel, the less they prepare. The gap between story and ability widens. The internal scoreboard reinforces the wrong metrics. The person counts interactions, responses, and impressions. They stop counting error rates in private practice because there is no private practice. They stop counting how many times they fail in rehearsal because there is no rehearsal. Without these tallies, there is no discomfort strong enough to change behavior. Comfort grows and attaches to identity. The person becomes someone who is good under pressure, so they manufacture pressure by declining preparation. They need the environment to confirm their self-femen. They have reasons that sound sensible. They say preparation wastes time if the future is uncertain. They say experience reduces the need to rehearse. They say modern tools handle edge cases. They say the team can cover gaps. These claims are partly true in aggregate, which is why they feel justified, but they are wrong at the level of the individual's capability. Capability decays when it is not trained. The decay is masked by a cooperative environment and by the ease of doing work that no longer stretches the person. Social comparison distorts perception. The person sees others faking depth and succeeding, so they conclude that surface is enough. They overlook those who prepare in private and do not advertise it. They also misread the cause of others' outcomes. They attribute success to polish, not to unseen rehearsal. They copy the visible parts and get the visible response. That response maintains the illusion. They cannot see the counterfactual where the person who prepared survives when conditions change, while polish fails. Confidence no longer comes from contact with the task. It comes from the memory of prior contact. This makes confidence stale. It does not update with reality. The person carries a fixed level of assurance into every setting. That steadiness signals leadership to people who cannot see the inside. The signal is rewarded until it fails under load. The person does not notice the timeline of that failure shortening. They only notice that each time they are slightly more surprised. Observers do not announce what they see. They recalibrate quietly. The person is placed into a different category without being told. The label shifts from reliable to convenient. It happens after a series of small interactions where depth is not present. Polite responses replace engaged questions. People stop testing the person for substance because the answer is predictable. Meetings are kept smooth and shallow to avoid exposing a gap that everyone already assumes. They were no longer taken seriously. Leveraged moves without noise. Decisions happen in messages. The person is not copied on. Drafts circulate earlier, and they are excluded from the early round. By the time they see the work, the real choices are done. Their remarks are treated as style comments. The habit of involving them fades because it does not change outcomes. Authority drains as a function of time spent being present but unprepared. Alters step in not by challenge, but by consistency. Trust left and it did not return. Respect reallocates to those who come ready. People with notes show up first. People with tests, data, or rehearsed arguments shape the agenda. Observers begin by asking those people questions and leave the comfortable person for later. When time runs out, the later slot is cut. No one apologizes. The pattern repeats, and soon the person is always hearing decisions rather than making them. The environment has learned that smooth confidence is cheap. and prepared substance is scarce. The calendar looks the same at first. Invitations still arrive, but they change in type. They are for updates, not for design. They are for status, not for strategy. The person is asked to present summaries, not to lead work. This is framed as efficiency, not The person might even welcome it, because it allows them to maintain the surface without the cost of preparation. They interpret this as a better fit. The organization interprets it as containment. Their positions shrank in every meeting. Outcomes become predictable. The person arrives with a well-formed story and thin checks. Questions expose a hole. They pivot to generalities and promise follow-up. No one follows up because the decisions have been pushed past them. Projects drift away. Their name remains on documents as a courtesy. Their scope constricts to areas where failure has low blast radius. The environment creates safe lanes for them, which look like respect until compared to what others handle. Leaders above adjust their expectations. They stop using the person as a hedge against uncertainty. They stop relying on them for critical rehearsals. They stop asking them to pressure test plans. Instead, they place them in visible slots that require composure and minimal variance. These slots keep the machine moving but do not allocate leverage. Over time, compensation of attention shifts to the people who reduce variance by preparation, not by demeanor. The person's status plateaus, then slopes down without public comment. Titles can stay the same. Compensation can even rise by default, but the map of who matters has changed, and the person is not on it. Others who prepare quietly are trusted with sensitive tasks and allowed to set boundaries. The comfortable person is kept flexible. They are available because fewer people depend on them when the stakes are high. Dependence is the base of power. So power fades at the same rate as dependence. This slide is hidden in plain view. Peers stop bringing them into early thinking. They assume the person will prefer to see polished work. They assume details will be dismissed as too in the weeds. They stop wasting time trying to prove their depth to someone who does not value it. A private channel opens among those who prepare. The comfortable person is invited to the final review, where they can do no harm. They become a figure people root around instinctively. No one accuses them of anything. No one needs to. Clients and partners adjust as well. They invite the person to introductions and wrap-ups. They seek advice elsewhere. The person is thanked for their presence and acknowledged for their calm. They mistake this for esteem. It is etiquette. When a conflict arises, people with preparation have leverage because their evidence is banked. The comfortable person has only tone. Tone does not move decisions. It never did. It only bought time, which is now gone. Reputation lags, then snaps. At first, the person carries the inertia of earlier competence. New hires respect the name and the role. That buffer drains as they collect direct interactions. Each superficial exchange replaces the story of prior strength with the experience of current softness. When enough people hold the updated view, the old story cannot be recovered with words. The change is quiet and total. The person is what they have shown lately. The person's range tightens. They are now safe in limited contexts where polish is sufficient. Outside those contexts, people place someone else in front. The person is now an option, not a default. They do not see the moment when this reversal locks in. It was not a confrontation. It was repeated exclusion from moments that proved competence. By the time they look around, the environment has no memory of them being essential. The new baseline feels normal to everyone else. They try to leverage past wins as currency. The room acknowledges the history and moves on. History does not produce confidence in future execution without current signals of preparation. Repetition of the old narrative reads as avoidance. Attempts to reassert control in live settings backfire because the skill has decayed and the gaps are visible. Others step in to close those gaps in real time. The person's authority shrinks further because the correction came from someone else. The longer this runs, the less a single performance matters. Observers discount any isolated strong showing as a spike. It does not shift the base rate they have observed. Attention returns to those who show up prepared each time. Invitations reflect that calculation. The person's plate fills with tasks no one contests. They are efficient and smooth. They are not central. The hierarchy of trust has been redrawn. There is no argument to be had. No one is interested in debating the merits of comfort as a philosophy. They have already reallocated exposure to risk. They are already working with the people who remove uncertainty before it can compound. The comfortable person is not punished. They are archived. Their contact remains. Their influence does not. The outcome does not hinge on their belief about it. It has already happened.